recap. Tales of Herding Gods, Chapter 437, Chapter. Giant stone statues strode toward the place where the earth had cracked open, and the moment they arrived, every one of them began to dig like mad beasts possessed. Their massive arms swept through soil and stone like raging whirlwinds, flinging earth high into the air, while boulders the size of houses were ripped from the ground and hurled aside. Chinmu and the others aboard Sun's ship watched the spectacle with astonishment. Though the devil god stone statues moved with crude and awkward motions, the speed of their digging was terrifyingly fast. Before long, a vast pit had already been carved out, and their enormous bodies gradually sank deeper and deeper into the earth. Even then, rocks and chunks of mountain stone continued to be thrown up endlessly from within the pit. "These fellows dig faster than dogs," Cripple muttered in disbelief. King Kun turned his gaze toward Rat Immortal and said, "Speaking of digging holes, aside from Tuxing Feng, Rat Immortal should be second to none in this matter." Rat Immortal slowly stood up and replied, "Allow me to see what these creatures are attempting." As soon as his words fell, his body trembled and shifted. In the blink of an eye, he transformed into a massive gray rat. The huge rat leaped forward like a flying shadow and dashed down from Sun's ship. Within only a few breaths, he had already reached the ground. Without hesitation, he plunged into the soil and vanished completely beneath the earth. Rat Immortal is skilled at searching for treasures and is known far and wide as Treasure Uncle Rat, King Kun explained calmly. Traveling underground poses no obstacle to him. If there is anything hidden there, he will certainly find it. Chinmu lifted his head and looked upward. Above them, luxurious blossoms filled the sky like an endless sea of flowers. Petals bloomed in radiant clusters, shrouding Sunship within their colorful canopy. In the heart of one enormous flower stood Flower Sovereign, her figure poised elegantly as though she herself had sprouted from its center. "We must deal with the gods of high heavens," Chinmu said firmly. He turned to Apothecary and the others. "Does anyone have a plan?" Apothecary smiled faintly. "Before this, we had none, but now we do." King Kun drew out his golden horn and said calmly, "Allow me." As he spoke, he rose slowly from the pond and respectfully bowed toward the golden horn. This golden horn was his sacred artifact, refined long ago into a divine golden spear. After King Kun paid his respects, the golden horn suddenly shot forward with a sharp whistle. A piercing sound to read through the air as a streak of dazzling golden light flashed across the sky. What remained behind was a thin golden line marking the path of the sacred artifact. The golden line pierced directly through the center of Flower Sovereign's brows. It burst out through the back of her head without the slightest pause before rushing toward another god and striking through him in the same manner. The golden horn shifted direction again with terrifying speed. Within moment, it had passed through the bodies of every god present. Even Star Sovereign Yang could notescape its visitation. A clear and melodious whistle echoed through the sky. The golden horn returned and landed once more in King Kun's hand. The faint golden line that lingered across the heavens slowly dimmed before finally vanishing completely. Chinmu's heart trembled slightly as she stared at the golden horn. Despite killing numerous gods, figures such as Flower Sovereign and Star Sovereign, two among the 4 sovereigns of high heavens, the golden horn bore no even a single drop of blood upon it. Its surface remained flawless and unblemished. One had to remember that the corporeal bodies of high heavens gods were unimaginably powerful. Even cult legacy treasures could scarcely leave a scratch upon them. Attempting to break their bodies by brute force was like smashing an egg against solid stone and expecting the rock to crack. Yet the sacred artifact of the East Seas Kun people had not suffered the slightest damage. This alone showed just how terrifyingly powerful this treasure truly was. Of course, the strength of a sacred artifact alone was not everything. One must also consider the strength of the one wielding it. Earlier, when King Kun had clashed with the gods of high heavens, his inability to prevail must have stemmed from the limits of his own cultivation. "King Kun," Chinmu said thoughtfully, "the 3-bridge method to repair the divine bridge has already been shared with the world by me. Why not come ashore and learn it?" King Kun stared at him in astonishment. "So it was Human Emperor who spread those techniques for repairing the divine bridge? I have already obtained them. To speak honestly, our Kun people frequently come ashore to trade with Eternal Peace Empire. We exchange what we possess for what we lack." Chinmu finally relaxed when he heard this. "So that is the case." At that moment, a massive gray rat suddenly sprinted back onto Sun's ship. As it neared them, the creature transformed once again into a gray-robed elder. He hurried over to the group, breathing heavily. "There truly is something beneath the earth," Rat Immortal gasped. "I saw a vast hollow space, an imperial residence that seems temporary, a god statue so large it is outrageous, and a gigantic knife." Apothecary quickly guided him into the pond of pure yang to soak while speaking gently. "Your wounds have not yet healed. Speak slowly." Rat Immortal inhaled deeply several times before continuing. "There is a passageway beneath the ground, and those stone statues have already dug their way to it. If one continues downward, one will reach the Earth's core, which opens into a vast stretch of land. At the center of that space stands a god statue that seems to have erupted upward from underground. Chains stretch everywhere, binding the statue and connecting to numerous palaces. I cannot tell how that god statue ended up tangled within those chains, but they are thicker even than the chains dragging the sun behind Sun's ship." Everyone present was astonished and exchanged glances. The chains that pulled the sun had been forged during the founding emperor period. Such divine artifacts could no longer be replicated in the present age. Yet the chains beneath God-broken mountain range were even thicker than those. Could they also be remnants from the founding emperor period? "If the chains of Sun's ship exist to bind the sun," Death suddenly said slowly, "then perhaps the chains underground exist to bind that god statue." Everyone's hearts trembled. Why would a god statue need to be bound by chains? Rat Immortal shook his head. "No, you have guessed incorrectly. Those chains are connected to the surrounding palaces and pass through the underground space. While following the path dug by the stone statues, I saw the palaces floating around that god statue. It did not appear to have been there from the beginning. Rather, it looked as though it had suddenly appeared." He continued, "It is also quite similar to the god statues within Eternal Peace Empire. It probably appeared at the same time as them, except that its luck was poor, and it emerged beneath God-broken mountain range. When it rose upward, it collided with those chains and became trapped, unable to break through to the surface." "There must be many treasures within those palaces," Cripple said excitedly. "Let's go steal them. Bah! Let's go pick up some treasure." "You have only just regained your life, yet you still wish to run around recklessly and risk losing it again," Apothecary scolded with a frown. "Rat Immortal, what else did you see?" "There was also a floating bridge suspended in the air," Rat Immortal said, "and it connects the palaces surrounding the god statue." "If chains already exist, what is the floating bridge for?" King Kun asked in confusion. "What purpose do either of them serve?" Rat Immortal's expression became strange, as if he wished to speak but hesitated. There was also a gigantic knife hanging above the god statue's head. The chains were used to bind that knife. When the god statue burst out from underground, it may have struck its head against the blade and been sliced by it. "What knife?" Apothecary asked, bewildered. "A huge knife, an unbelievably huge knife." Rat Immortal revealed his two long front teeth while his whiskers twitched nervously. "Even Heaven Knife's blade would seem pitifully small in comparison. That knife stretches from north to south, and right now it is embedded in the head of that god statue. It is unimaginably long. But when I looked at that blade, I noticed something very strange." He gathered his thoughts before continuing. "Granny C, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, and the gods of high heavens all appear to be inside that clear blade. The knife's surface is like a mirror. Their primordial spirits are battling within it without realizing anything is wrong." Chinmu and the others imagined this sight carefully. A chill ran down their spines despite the lack of cold. Granny C and the others had activated the great overarching Heavenly Stars formation to drag out all the primordial spirits of the gods of high heavens. Yet all of them had fallen into the internal space within a knife? Eternal Peace, Imperial Preceptor, had originally intended to perish together with the gods of high heavens, but the terrifying force of the earthquake cauldron had been absorbed by some dreadful energy beneath the earth. Could that knife be responsible as well? King Kun looked at Rat Immortal blankly. "We landed within a strange and boundless space that seemed completely empty," he said slowly. "I would never have imagined that it might actually exist inside the blade of a knife. We fought for so long, yet we failed to notice anything. His tone carried deep disbelief. Rat Immortal then continued, "The stone statues arrived before I did. Several of them appear to be constructing a sacrificial altar, a very large one. I have no idea what they intend to use it for." Chinmu's heart trembled faintly. "Rat Immortal," he said, "could you draw the appearance of that sacrificial altar?" Rat Immortal nodded and raised his hand. Using his vital chi as a brush, he painted lines in the air. Soon a sacrificial altar formed before them. It looked remarkably similar to the altar Chinmu had once seen beside the hole leading to the other world. The altar meant to allow the devil army to cross the barriers between worlds and invade eternal peace. The altar Rat Immortal had drawn bore similar runes, though there were subtle differences. Chinmu fell briefly into thought, his curiosity stirred. "Who has a mirror?" he asked. Cripple grinned mischievously. Death loves admiring his own handsome face shamelessly. Others may not carry mirrors, but he certainly does. Death snorted and produced a mirror. Chinmu immediately said, "I need 2 mirrors. Does anyone else have one?" "I have one," Apothecary muttered. Death glared at him. "You do not even have a face. Why would you need a mirror?" "To tidy my clothes," Apothecary replied righteously. Chinmu took both mirrors and placed them to the left and right of the sacrificial altar Rat Immortal had drawn. "Rat Immortal," he said, "can you push this altar into the mirror?" Rat Immortal felt a tremor run through his heart, yet he obeyed. The sacrificial altar, formed from vital chi, drifted forward and entered the mirror. Chinmu studied the reflection carefully before suddenly becoming enlightened. "These 2 sacrificial altars mirror one another," he said. "The altar the stone statues are building corresponds exactly to the one in the other world. They intend to transfer their devil army directly to the altar beneath the earth. That altar must function as a form of teleportation formation. Though it differs from the one used by Heavenly Saint Cult, their method is far more primitive and relies upon blood sacrifice." Cripple burst into laughter. "Why are those fellows sending over an army?" he said. "Are they planning to sacrifice the entire force to awaken that god beneath the earth?" No one laughed with him. Soon even Cripple's laughter faltered and died. If a devil army arrived and sacrificed themselves to awaken the god statue with blood rituals, who knew what might happen? "That god statue is most likely not a god," Death said coldly. "It is probably the ancestor of their devil race. Those stone statues rushed over here to rescue their ancestor. After sacrificing the army, the god statue will revive. After all our struggles and battles, everything will be meaningless. The descendants of that god statue will revive him with their own hands." Silence fell across the group. Village Chief was dead. Old Rulai was dead. Old Dowmaster was dead. Even Xuan Shengwu, White Immortal, Yellow Immortal, and many others had been lost. Yet in the end, they still could not prevent the descent of true gods and devils. They no longer possessed the strength to fight. Once that true devil awakened, every one of them would die. Chinmu continued studying the reflections within the mirrors. After a moment, he suddenly spoke. "Does anyone else have mirrors? I need 2 more." Apothecary rummaged through his herb basket and produced 2 additional mirrors. Tossing them over, Death raised his eyebrows and snorted coldly. "Flirtatious!" Chinmu placed 1 mirror between the 2 originals so that light reflected across them. Using the 4th mirror, he redirected the reflected light once again. After several reflections, the sacrificial altar appearing in the final mirror had become reversed. Chinmu pondered briefly before speaking. If the devil army could not be transferred, could those stone statues still awaken the god statue themselves? "What is Little Human Emperor planning?" Apothecary asked curiously. Chinmu smiled bashfully. "Grandpa Apothecary, please do not tease me. I merely plan to forge 2 additional teleportation sacrificial altars to interfere with their teleportation. If that happens, the devil army might fail to arrive here." He pointed toward the mirrors. "It is just like these reflections. If I slightly adjust the angle of the middle mirror, the image will never reach the final mirror." Translator Ninetales. Editor Dark Gem. The divine art Chinmu cultivated was the teleportation technique of the Heavenly Devil Cult. Its foundation was entirely different from the crude blood sacrifice methods used by the devil gods of the other world. Their sacrificial teleportation was ancient and barbaric, relying on primal offerings of blood and life. In contrast, the Heavenly Devil cult's teleportation divine art was built upon the principles of space algebra. Only those who possessed astonishing attainments in calculation and understanding of spatial principles could wield it. The greatest distinction between the two forms of divine art lay in their philosophy. The teleportation divine art of the Heavenly Devil cult understood both the phenomenon and its cause. It sought the path, calculated the answer, and then reached the destination. However, blood sacrifice teleportation only knew the result without understanding the cause. It sought no comprehension, only convenience. And because of this difference, Chenmu and the others had an opportunity to interfere with it. Rat Immortal, take me and Grandpa Deaf underground. I must inspect the rune layout of their sacrificial altar. Once I understand it, I will execute teleportation divine art, and Grandpa Deaf will reproduce it with his brush. Divine Flood Dragon King, follow me. I will require your magic power, Chenmu said swiftly. Grandpa Apothecary, you and the others stay here. Guard Granny C and the Imperial Preceptor's corporeal bodies. The plan was decided in an instant. Rat Immortal immediately carried them off the sunship. Do not move, I will bring you underground. With those words, his body trembled and expanded. In the blink of an eye, he transformed into a massive rat. A swirling mass of demon wind surged forth, wrapping Chenmu, Deaf, and the Divine Flood Dragon King within it as he plunged downward into the earth. Chenmu only felt himself rushing swiftly through layers of soil and stone. Before long, the rushing motion suddenly halted. The space before his eyes opened wide, vast beyond imagination. When he raised his gaze, the sight before him matched exactly what Rat Immortal had described. A colossal god statue had risen from the earth, but had been trapped in place. Countless incomparably thick chains gathered around it, and wherever those chains converged, magnificent palaces had been constructed to anchor them. Beneath the statue lay even more chains, coiled tightly around a long blade that stretched from the north all the way to the south. The blade gleamed with a chilling brilliance, bound tightly as if someone feared it might fly away. Its length was so immense that Chenmu could not even imagine who possessed the strength to wield such a weapon. When the unfortunate god statue had risen from the ground earlier, it had struck against the blade. The incomparably sturdy head of the statue had been sliced open directly between the brows. Upon the raised palm of the statue, more than 10 towering stone statues bustled back and forth. They were constructing a massive sacrificial altar. Though they themselves were enormous and their project immense, when compared with the god statue, they appeared minuscule. Of course, Chenmu, Deaf, and the others were even more insignificant. Chenmu activated the Nine Heavens Eyes awakening skill and carefully examined the runes carved upon the sacrificial altar. Memorizing each line and structure, Rat Immortal carried him through the surrounding space again and again so that he could observe it from every angle. Only after a long time did Chenmu finally commit every rune to memory. Rat Immortal, that is enough, Chenmu said softly. Take us to that palace. I need to rest there and calculate. Rat Immortal brought them to one of the palaces. A long floating bridge extended from it, connecting to distant cliffs. It appeared that people had once lived here in the past, guarding this underground realm. Chenmu stepped onto solid ground and surveyed his surroundings. The vermilion gates of the hall were tightly sealed. With his divine eyes, he could see a complicated ceiling formation laid across the entrance, making it extremely difficult to enter. Then we will work here. Chenmu opened his Tao Tea sack and rummaged inside. One after another, he withdrew numerous calculation tools, a Wuji plate, a Taiji plate, 5 elements beads, and 8 trigrams plate. Soon the ground was filled with a dazzling array of instruments. Even the 8 trigrams plates themselves had numerous structural variations. Solid and broken lines could shift and rearrange themselves endlessly. Because every structure required a different method of calculation, Chenmu produced an enormous quantity of them. With a surge of vital qi, he lifted the tools into the air. Instantly, countless instruments separated, rotated, and reassembled themselves in midair. The complexity of the calculations left Rat Immortal and Deaf utterly stunned, their eyes dazzled by the sight. After a moment, an incomparably complicated calculation apparatus appeared in the sky, spanning several yards in radius. binary, quaternary, centenary, octal, novanary, decimal, hexadecimal, and even base 64. Countless strange components rotated and shifted as Chinmu's vital chi drove them, producing continuous crunching sounds. Beads used for calculus filled the sky, constantly bouncing and shifting. There were also cubes and towering pillars of cubes. At times they lengthened, at times they shortened, always advancing forward in sequence. "Can you understand any of this?" Rat Immortal whispered secretly to Def. Def waved his hand dismissively. "I can't hear you." Rat Immortal did not know whether to laugh or cry. Suddenly, Chinmu shook his touty sack again. All of the calculation tools instantly flew back inside, disappearing without a trace. "The calculations are complete. Grandpa Def, the rest depends on you." Chinmu steadied his spirit and circulated his vital chi. In an instant, a teleportation formation appeared in the sky, countless runes shining with brilliant light. Def raised his eyes and studied it briefly before lifting his brush. His strokes moved like dragons and serpents as he painted swiftly in the air. In moments, the entire formation appeared before them. Every rune marking was identical to Chinmu's teleportation divine art. What he used was the technique of the painting path, none other than the world in the painting technique Chinmu had once mentioned to him. In the past, Def's painting path manifested outward. When he painted wind, wind would appear. When he painted lightning, lightning would appear. But now his art flowed from the outside inward. Within each painting, an entire world lay hidden. Chinmu dispersed the formation and once again circulated his vital chi. Another teleportation formation appeared in the air. Def painted the second formation as well. When Rat Immortal looked at the painting, he was completely stunned. Though Def had clearly painted upon a flat surface, when one looked within it, space existed inside the painting itself. It was completely identical to the teleportation divine art Chinmu had performed. Because of limitations in cultivation, the divine art itself did not cover a large area and its power was limited. However, when Rat Immortal peered into Def's painting, he was shocked beyond words. The space contained within it was vast beyond imagination, covering an area with a radius of an entire mile. Chinmu performed the teleportation divine art once more, and Def painted the third painting. After it was completed, Chinmu instructed him to paste the third painting beneath his feet. Def was momentarily stunned and did not understand the purpose. Nevertheless, he complied. A beam of light shot forth from Chinmu's eyes and pointed toward the space above the enormous blade. "Grandpa Def, place the first painting there." Def flicked his brush lightly. The first painting flew out and landed precisely where Chinmu's gaze had fallen. It then slowly vanished into nothingness. Chinmu silently calculated for a moment. Another beam of light shot from his eyes and landed upon the abdomen of the god statue. Place the second painting there. With a powerful stroke of his brush, Def sent the second painting flying out. It disappeared without the slightest delay. Chinmu let out a long breath and smiled faintly. With this arrangement, the Devil Army will not be able to teleport here using the blood sacrifice altar. Rat Immortal frowned slightly. "Will that really be enough?" Chinmu nodded, yet Rat Immortal still felt uneasy. "Are you certain? If the Devil Army successfully teleports here and sacrifices themselves to revive this god statue, it will become an unstoppable catastrophe. Are you sure these teleportation formations of yours can truly disrupt their sacrificial altar?" Def also felt uneasy. Nervously, he asked, "Muir, where will these three paintings send the Devil Army?" Chinmu hesitated briefly before replying, "I cannot change their teleportation destination. I can only disrupt it." Rat Immortal sighed. "If it is only disruption, doesn't that mean the army will still be transferred?" Chinmu nodded and explained. "Teleportation is a spatial displacement that requires extremely precise algebraic calculations. I use two teleportation formations to interfere with the mirrored positions of their two sacrificial altars. Even if the interference is small, to a calculation that precise, even a difference of an inch can become a difference of 1,000 miles. No error can be tolerated. Once they activate both sacrificial altars, they will." "Human Emperor Qin, this will not do." Rat Immortal interrupted resolutely. "This concerns the survival or destruction of everyone. We cannot gamble everything on an inch of deviation. I must find Poison King and have him poison all the devils who teleport over. Come with me." His demon wind swept the three of them up as he prepared to leave the underground space. But at that very moment, an overwhelming power crossed through time and space and bombarded them from another world. The surrounding space warped violently. Above their heads, the vast stone ceiling twisted and distorted, forming a gigantic whirlpool. Everything within that vortex became distorted and gradually dissolved into emptiness. A blinding pillar of teleportation light shone down from the whirlpool, illuminating the enormous sacrificial altar upon the god statue's palm. That beam of light came from the deep heavens of another world. It passed through Death's first painting and landed directly upon the sacrificial altar. Upon the palm of the statue, the stone statues stood upright. They half knelt around the altar, chanting in resounding and ancient devil language, as though reciting a profound incantation. At that moment, the second teleportation formation activated. The incomparably bright teleportation light shifted slightly, so subtly that it was almost impossible to notice. Suddenly, countless devil soldiers appeared within the pillar of light. Tens of thousands of troops rushed over from the other world. It's too late. Rat Immortal felt a chill run through his heart. Yet just as despair began to rise within him, a strange change occurred. Within the teleportation beam, the bodies of countless soldiers suddenly twisted and distorted. In the flowing light, they shattered into pieces. All of them became corpses. The teleportation pillar turned blood red. Countless life forms screamed in agony within the light, yet their struggles were completely futile. While Rat Immortal stared in astonishment, Chinmu suddenly spoke. "Divine Flood Dragon King, join me?" Rat Immortal immediately turned toward him. Chinmu stood at the center of the third painting. The Divine Flood Dragon King coiled against his back and transformed into a dragon-shaped tattoo. Chinmu's aura surged explosively. His face grew slightly pale as he spoke. Gate of Heaven Influence. A majestic gate manifested behind him. The teleportation pillars bent and warped toward him, and the countless devil soldiers passed through the gate one after another. Suddenly, a corpse shot out from the gate and landed beside Chinmu's feet. It was the body of a devil that had just been teleported over. Its limbs were twisted grotesquely, and its head had been embedded into its chest. It was clearly a failure that occurred during spatial teleportation. Its body and primordial spirit had been reassembled incorrectly because of the error in calculations. The corporeal body had in an unnatural form, while the primordial spirit had fallen into Yudu. Bang, bang, bang! In an instant, countless corpses poured out from the Gate of Heaven influence. Within moments, a mountain of corpses rose around Chinmu. The pile grew higher and higher until it filled the entire hall. Everyone, please forgive me. Suddenly, the third painting activated. The enormous teleportation formation erupted with brilliant light that dazzled the eyes, sweeping away everything around the palace. Rat Immortal and Death were teleported out. Their bodies appeared high in the air. Before they could even land, countless severed limbs appeared beside them in the sky. A rain of corpses descended upon the great ruins. They raised their heads. On the other side of the teleportation light, the Gate of Heaven influence stood towering. Before the gate stood the young man, his eyes moist with sorrow as he buried tens of thousands of soldiers from another world.